Welcome. Tonight, we're leaving behind the noise of the modern world and step into a place of stone walls, echoing footsteps, and silence older than memory. This is the story of a life shaped by bells, a life measured not in minutes, but in prayers, where time flows in chants and candlelight, and each day is a quiet echo of the one before it. In this episode, we'll explore what it was really like inside a medieval monastery. You'll rise before dawn to chant psalms in the dark. You'll sweep cloisters, copy ancient texts, and eat in silence beside other hooded figures. Then we'll meet a woman who defied all expectations, a visionary named Hildegard of Bingen. We'll lose ourselves in the delicate pages of a forgotten book of ours. And finally, we'll join a lavish bishop's banquet, where silence is replaced with ceremony and every glance carries meaning. So take a slow breath, relax, and settle in. Let's step inside the cloistered walls of a medieval monastery. You are a novice. The outer world has fallen away. Its noise, its chaos, its temptations. You've taken your first vows, not final ones yet, but enough to surrender your name and your voice to something older, slower, and much more quiet. It begins with bells. There are no clocks here, no mechanical devices to measure time. The hours are kept by the bell, which tolls from a squat tower of weathered stone. Its tone long and low like the steady breath of the monastery itself. Your day starts in darkness. Matins is the first hour, and it is truly early, somewhere between midnight and 3 a.m., depending on the season. You rise in the dormitory, a long, cold room filled with narrow beds. The air is damp and smells faintly of wool, old stone, and the lingering smoke from the evening fire, now gone out. You dress silently, layering wool over linen, the rough fabric, familiar now, though it still itches a little at your neck. Your feet slide into simple sandals, worn soft from repetition. Then you move in silence, joining the slow procession of other monks as they make their way down the corridor to the chapel. The chapel is still and candlelit. The light flickers on stained glass and carved wood, casting faint colors onto the stone floor. The monks chant in Latin in unison, their voices rising and falling like waves low, calm, without harmony, just a slow and sacred drone. The Gregorian chants are not meant to be entertaining. They are prayers, sung without vanity, as offerings to time itself. After the hour of matins, there may be a short rest, but you rarely fall back asleep. The next bell comes quickly, laud sung at the break of dawn. You return to prayer, your stomach quietly hollow, your thoughts still waking with the sun. As daylight creeps across the cloister, work begins. If you are assigned to the garden, you step out into the early chill and tend to the herbs, vegetables, and medicinal plants that grow in neat, square plots. You might trim sage and rosemary, collect marigold petals, or turn the soil gently with a wooden tool worn smooth by hands like yours. If you are tasked with cleaning, you sweep the cloister walkways, scrub the dining benches, or wash garments in basins with cold water and lye soap. The rhythm of the work is slow, repeated, unhurried. There is no rush, only routine. Silence is kept even during labor. Communication is minimal, handled by small hand gestures practiced over time, pointing to tools, bowing in greeting, raising a hand to say wait. Later in the morning, you may be assigned to the scriptorium, a long room lined with windows to catch the light. Here, scribes sit at desks, copying religious texts, Bibles, psalters, sermons, commentaries. If you are learning to write, you begin with practice alphabets, forming letters slowly, with a quill pen dipped carefully into ink made from oak galls and iron salts. Mistakes are not erased. They are corrected with tiny notes or patched with scraped parchment. Illumination is a separate skill reserved for the more experienced. You marvel at the delicate gold leaf, the blues made from lapis, and the curling vines that fill the margins of sacred books. Meals come at fixed times. In summer, there are 2 meals a day. In winter, only 1. At midday, the bell calls you to the refectory. You enter in silence, wash your hands in cold water from a stone basin, and sit on long wooden benches. The food is plain rye bread, lentil stew, perhaps a piece of salted fish. One monk reads aloud from a pulpit while the rest eat in silence, listening to scripture or sermons. You chew slowly, not because the food demands it, but because time here is never hurried. After the meal, you return your bowl and cup to be washed. The afternoon continues with more labor or reading. If the monastery is large, there may be a library, dusty, quiet, its shelves filled with handmade books bound in leather and horn. You may read the Rule of Saint Benedict, the Lives of Saints, or theological treatises by thinkers like Augustine or Isidore. The hours of prayer punctuate everything. Terce at mid-morning, sext at noon, none in the mid-afternoon. These are short services, each filled with chant, bowed heads, and brief meditations. You do not think in terms of hours or minutes. You think in terms of bells, of psalms, of candles burning low. The cloister garden offers occasional moments of respite. You walk slowly beneath covered arches, listening to the echo of your sandals on the flagstones. In spring, the scent of lavender and thyme fills the air. Bees hum. Birds perch in the high niches of the walls. The world beyond is distant but not forgotten. Evenings draw in early during winter. Vespers is sung as the light fades. The flames from the candelabras dance across the faces of saints carved in stone. The rhythm continues, sacred, unchanging, like breathing. After the final meal, you pray one last time. This service is short and soft, a lullaby of sacred words. You are reminded of death, of sleep, of the passage from one to the other. Into your hands, O Lord, I commend my spirit. You return to your bed, the straw sack, scratchy but familiar. The dormitory is quiet. You hear breathing, the creak of a wooden beam, the occasional cough. And outside, the bell waits, patient as always, ready to mark the beginning of another day exactly like this one. A life of prayer, of silence, of rhythm. This is what life was like in a medieval monastery. Now, let us drift from the cool stone corridors of the male monastery to the green hills of the Rhineland, where a different kind of devotion was taking shape. It is the year 1112, in a fortress-like convent near Dissebodenberg, in what is now Germany. A young girl of noble birth is offered to the church. Her name is Hildegard. She is the 10th child of her family, a tithe child, given as an offering to God. At the age of just 8 years old, she is enclosed in a stone anchorage, sealed away with a female recluse named Jutta. Their lives become a form of living burial cloistered completely from the world. But while her body is confined, Hildegard's inner life begins to unfurl like ivy on stone. From a young age, she experiences vivid visions, not hallucinations, not dreams. She will call them the voice of the living light. But she tells no one, at first. In these early years, silence is survival. Her days follow the same rhythm as other women of the convent, rising in the dark, singing psalms, weaving, fasting, praying, copying scriptures by hand. And yet something stirs. She feels things, knows things, sees things, visions of light and sound, of cosmic harmony, of divine order written across the heavens. Years pass. When Jutta dies, Hildegard is chosen as the new magistra, the spiritual leader of her community. She is in her 40s now. Her health has always been fragile, her frame thin, her stomach delicate, but her mind and her voice are growing stronger. One night, another vision comes clearer, louder than before. A command. She is told by the light to write down what she sees, and this time she obeys. It is a terrifying act. Women do not write theology. They do not speak with authority. But Hildegard begins her book, Sivia's short for Know the Ways of the Lord. She describes radiant mandalas, divine fire, and harmony between the stars and the soul. Her Latin is imperfect, fierthy, vibrant, unpolished, and yet it stirs something deep. She writes letters to bishops, abbots, and emperors. Her tone is always respectful, but never meek. She writes to the Pope, and he listens. By her mid-50s, Hildegard is no longer a hidden anchorite. She is a correspondent to kings, a healer of the sick, and eventually a composer of sacred music, unlike anything heard in the cloister. While the rest of the church clings to narrow plain song, Hildegard's compositions soar. Her melodies stretch far above the traditional range, rising and falling like birds in flight. They are music meant to transport, not just to praise. She writes in her own voice, in her own key, songs like O Virtues, Sapientia, and Ave Generosa shimmer with reverence and mystery. Her music was not written for show, it was prayer, it was vision turned to sound. But Hildegard was more than a musician and mystic. She was a botanist, recording the healing properties of herbs and stones. She was a philosopher, writing on the balance of the four bodily humors. She was a critic, warning priests against corruption and calling for reform. And perhaps most radical of all, she challenged silence itself. In one of her most famous acts of defiance, she allows a man who had been excommunicated to be buried on consecrated ground in her convent. The local clergy are furious. They forbid her nuns from singing the liturgy as punishment. But Hildegard refuses. She argues that singing is a divine act, that music is a reflection of heaven, that silencing the voice is to silence the spirit itself. The ban is eventually lifted. She wins. She always wins, but never with violence. Her rebellion is gentle. It is cloaked in prayer, wrapped in parchment, carried in melody. She found ways to lead without marching, to resist without shouting, to break rules by illuminating them. In the final decades of her life, Hildegard founds a new abbey on the Rupertsberg, a place of freedom and vision. There, she writes letters and music until her death at age 81, a staggering age in her time. The church would go on to call her a saint, later a doctor of the church, and to many, she is simply Hildegard, visionary, composer, healer, abbess, rebel, quiet, but never silent. We drift now from the living, breathing vision of Hildegard to something more delicate, more fragile, something passed from hand to hand across centuries. Not a building or a person, but a book of ours. It is small enough to hold in your hands, leather-bound, clasped in bronze. Inside, carefully inked lines of Latin, bright initials in red and blue, and delicate margins filled with flora, fauna, and mystery. A Book of Hours was a prayer book, but not just any prayer book. It was made not for priests or monks, but for the people, wealthy nobles, women of the court, sometimes even educated merchants. It offered the divine office, condensed for private devotion, a spiritual calendar, a map of sacred time, matins, lauds, prime, terce, sext, none, vespers, compline, each marked with readings, prayers, psalms, and instructions. To follow it was to step into the rhythm of the monastery, from a drawing room in Paris, a castle in Aragon, or a quiet manor in Kent. But not all books of hours were alike. Each was personalized, commissioned, customized. Some were modest black ink on parchment with modest decoration. Others, like the famed Rich's Heirs, were nearly overwhelming gold leaf illuminations, astrological diagrams, calendars full of saints and laborers. Pages came to life with pigs in gardens, knights jousting, women spinning, monks harvesting honey, and yet some books have secrets. Let's imagine one discovered in a quiet library in Flanders. It lies in a carved oak case, wrapped in linen. The first few pages are faded, but in taxons and calendar notes, written in careful Gothic script. Margins are filled with curling vines, tiny snails, a red squirrel, a woman with a falcon. But somewhere in the middle, there's a gap. Pages missing, torn, not carefully removed, jagged edges, a small smear of pigment where an image once was. And then, later, another oddity, a margin filled with grotesques, tiny hybrid creatures, half monkey, half bishop, a man being swallowed by a fish, a woman balancing a castle on her head. Why would a quiet devotional book contain such strange, almost playful, almost mocking art? Theories abound. Some say these images offered a visual break, whimsy between prayers. Others say they were deeply symbolic, coded references to current events, or reminders of sin and folly. Still others whisper of satire, secret commentary from the artists themselves, poking gentle fun at patrons who barely understood Latin. The missing pages may tell us more. Were they simply damaged? Or did they depict something controversial, unapproved saint, a mystical scene, a personal confession? In one surviving book, a page shows a crowned woman kneeling before the Virgin Mary. Her face is not generalized, it's specific, detailed, a portrait. We know now that this woman commissioned the book. Her likeness was placed within the story of salvation itself, a gentle request to be remembered, to be seen by the divine. These books were not passive, they were lived with, prayed over, touched. The oils from fingertips stained the corners of pages. Some held pressed flowers, locks of hair, notes in the margins, scrawled in later hands. They lived quiet lives beside their owners, through plague, through childbirth, through wars. Some were inherited, some lost, some burned, some buried with their owners, and some, like the one we imagine now, sit closed on a velvet shelf, waiting for someone to turn the page, to trace the vinework, to notice the missing pieces, to feel in the quiet rustle of parchment a heartbeat. The Book of Hours is more than a devotional. It is a mirror of a world faithful and flawed, beautiful, mysterious, half-remembered, like the gentle echoes of a prayer at twilight, still lingering in the margins of time. Of course, let's move now into the final chapter of this journey, beyond the quiet cloisters, and ink-stained pages into the banquet halls where the church elite feasted, maneuvered, and performed their roles in full view. Step quietly now beyond the cloister walls, leave behind the herb garden and the quiet cell, and follow the winding stone road to the city where cathedrals rise like mountains of faith and ambition, and at their heart, a bishop's palace. It is late afternoon, and the light through the high, stained glass windows is golden. Dust dances in the beams as servants move in silence, setting the table. This is not a monastery. This is the residence of a bishop, one of the most powerful men in Christendom, part priest, part noble, part politician, and tonight he is hosting a banquet. The table is long, heavy, and carved with saints and vines. A linen cloth, bleached bright white, is carefully unrolled. Upon it, pewter plates, goblets of Venetian glass, pitchers of wine and bread cut into delicate rounds, a centerpiece of fruit pomegranates, dates, and apples arranged like a still life of wealth. The bishop will arrive last, for now the guests gather in hushed pairs and small groups. Some are fellow clerics abbots and priors from nearby monastic houses. Others are lay noblesmen who fund churches, who send their sons into orders, who expect blessings in return. There is talk, but little laughter. This is not merely a meal, it is a performance. Every bite, every nod, every gesture matters. At last, the bishop enters. His robes are fine wool, edged in embroidery. A jeweled ring gleams on his hand. Behind him, an attendant carries his mitre and staff. The room falls into respectful silence. He offers a soft greeting in Latin and takes his seat at the head of the table. The first course arrives, perhaps pottage rich and thick, spiced with saffron and pepper, brought across continents. Then roasted game quail, or rabbit flavored with cloves, served with a sauce of wine and currants. Fish follows, tender and golden. The church calendar forbids meat on certain days, but that only sharpens the ingenuity of the cook. And then, peacocks, not always eaten, but presented resplendent feathers reattached, beaks painted gold. They are symbols, not sustenance. Bread is everywhere trenchers, cut from round loaves, both plate and food. Wine flows steadily, red, dark, sweetened with honey and mulled with cinnamon. Servants move like shadows refilling goblets, adjusting candelabras, clearing dishes. Conversation turns to church matters. The bishop listens as a younger canon describes a dispute over land. Another speaks of a relica, thorn said to be from the Savior's crown recently acquired from France. There is mention of Rome, of the Pope, of the delicate dance between power and piety. Through it all, the bishop remains calm, polished. He nods, he blesses, he corrects gently. You might imagine he has forgotten the monastery, the silence, the simple bread and stew. But sometimes you can see his eyes drift toward the small chapel in the corner, toward the candle flickering beside a carved wooden crucifix. Desert Fathers, Gregorian chant, the smell of wax and wool and old books. Perhaps he remembers, perhaps not. The feast continues. A jester appears tame, subdued, telling riddles more than jokes. There may be music, a lute softly strummed, or a small group of singers offering There are no raucous outbursts here. Even joy is measured. The final course is symbolic. Wafers shaped like doves, cheese molded to resemble scrolls. A subtle reminder, the Word of God is nourishment too. As the evening draws to a close, the bishop rises to speak. His voice is low, deliberate. He offers a blessing, not just for the food, but for the delicate balance they all maintain between the sacred and the temporal, between robes and swords, between cloister and court. The guests depart quietly, one by one. Torches flicker in the corridors. A servant gathers the leftover bread to be given to the poor. The bishop returns to his private quarters, removes his ring, and places it in a wooden box beside his bed. Outside, the city sleeps. The cathedral bells toll once, long and low, and somewhere, not far beyond the walls, monks rise in the dark once more to sing their first prayers of the day. The rhythm of the monastery lingers with you now, quiet footsteps on stone floors, the distant hum of plainchant, the turning of vellum pages in a dimly lit room. You've walked through silence, but also through strength. You've seen a life shaped not by ambition, but by repetition, not by spectacle, but by stillness. In the cloisters, the days passed in prayer and obedience, measured not in urgency, but in intention. In Hildegard's visions, the silence was broken, not by rebellion, but by radiance. In the Book of Hours, we found the heartbeat of a hidden world captured in gold and ink. And at the bishop's banquet, we watched power cloaked in ritual, softened by pageantry and ceremony. Each of these stories so differented, all bound by one quiet thread, the rhythm of devotion, the passage of sacred time. In a world where everything moved slowly, meaning was not found in noise or urgency. It was found in repetition, in care, in presence. And now, as you lay back, perhaps with the soft flicker of light still playing behind your eyelids, you might imagine the soft toll of a distant bell, calling not to wake, but to rest, not to pray, but to be still. You are not in the monastery, but the calm remains. Let the past fade gently behind you like the closing of a wooden door. Let your thoughts quiet, one by one, like candles slowly extinguished after Compline. And as you drift, remember this: in the silence of history, there is always something still breathing, still waiting, still holding a place just for you. Good night.